The night began with an uneasy silence that felt like a warning. Fans had been waiting all week for updates from Shinyu, who had been unusually quiet and distant. Her recent public appearances had shown her tired and withdrawn, as if she had been carrying a weight that no one else could see. So when her phone suddenly went dark that night and she stopped responding to messages entirely, the internet began to simmer with concern. But nothing compared to the moment Miles Wei received a single short message from her earlier that evening. A message that sounded nothing like her. A message that simply said, "I think something is wrong here. This is your moment to stay with us. Subscribe now so you do not miss a single second of the story unraveling before your eyes. What happens next will leave you breathless." The message came at a strange hour long past midnight, when the world was quiet and still. Miles read it twice, then 3 times, sensing the fear hiding between the simple words. He tried calling her, but every call went unanswered. Within seconds he grabbed his jacket, raced out of his building, and got into his car, his mind filled with every terrible possibility he had been trying to ignore. When he arrived at her complex, the hallways felt colder than usual. The lights flickered lazily, as if warning him that something was wrong. He climbed the stairs 2 steps at a time, listening for any sound, any sign of life. And then he saw it. Shinyu's apartment door was pushed open just enough for a thin line of darkness to spill into the corridor. The wooden frame scraped gently against the floor with every shift of the air. Miles froze, his breath caught in his throat. Shinyu would never leave her door like that. Never. He pushed the door wider and called her name, his voice trembling with fear. The moment he stepped inside, he realized instantly that something was terribly wrong. The small entryway was filled with an eerie silence that felt unnatural. A table lamp had fallen to the floor, its soft glow casting strange shadows across the room. Her script pages were scattered across the carpet as if someone had rifled through them in a hurry. A chair lay on its side, and one of her framed photos had shattered on the ground. Miles stood perfectly still, trying to make sense of the scene. It looked like someone had been searching for something. Or someone. And they had left in a rush. His heart pounded harder as he stepped deeper into the apartment, calling her name again and again, each time louder than the last. He walked into the living room and saw something that made his entire body go cold. A cup she had been drinking from earlier that day was still half full on the coffee table, untouched. Her jacket was thrown across the couch as if she had only stepped out for a moment. But she was not there. The silence felt heavy and suffocating. Then he noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. On the far wall behind the couch was a long single mark carved into the paint. A mark that had not been there before. A mark that told him there had been a struggle. Miles felt a chill travel down his spine. His hand shook as he reached for his phone. He tried calling her again, but once more her line rang unanswered. He walked toward her bedroom, afraid of what he might find. The door was ajar, the air inside cool and still. He pushed it open slowly, and the sight before him made him inhale sharply. Her bed covers were pulled to the side as if someone had sat there or stood there searching for something. Her vanity drawers had been opened and her personal items scattered across the floor. The only thing untouched was a small necklace she always kept beside her mirror. Miles picked it up with trembling fingers, knowing she never left it behind. He called her name again, and in that moment he heard it. A faint sound from the corner of the room. A quiet, trembling breath. He spun around and saw the shape of someone huddled behind the curtains, knees pulled to their chest, head buried in their arms. Shen Yue. Miles dropped to his knees and carefully peeled the curtain aside. Shen Yue lifted her face just enough for their eyes to meet. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The moment she saw Miles, she threw her arms around him as if she had been holding herself together for hours and could finally let go. She whispered in a broken voice, saying she had heard footsteps outside her door earlier. She had gone to check, but the moment she opened the door, someone pushed it hard enough to force their way in. She stumbled back. She tried to scream. But the intruder had already stepped inside the apartment. She could not see their face. Their silhouette had lingered in the doorway just long enough to terrify her. Then they moved quickly through her home, opening drawers, tossing things aside as if they were searching for something very specific. Shinyu said she had crawled into the bedroom and hidden behind the curtains while the intruder moved from room to room. She held her breath praying they would not find her. She listened to her own heart pounding so loudly she feared it would give her away. She waited until she heard the footsteps fade and then silence. She waited longer, still unable to move, unable to think, still frozen with fear. Miles felt his own heart shatter as she spoke. He held her close, telling her she was safe, telling her he was here now, telling her he would not leave her alone again. He walked her out of the apartment, his hand never leaving hers. The hallway light seemed brighter now, as though the world was finally catching its breath. Downstairs he called for help, explaining everything while Shinyu leaned against him, her eyes tired, her voice barely above a whisper. When she finally stepped outside, the cool night air hit her face and she closed her eyes, letting the tension drain from her body. She was safe. But her story had only just begun. By dawn the entire internet was awake. Fans across the world were in shock, flooding every platform with questions and concern. The story of the forced door and the terrifying night spread like wildfire. People demanded answers and wanted to know who had entered her home and what they had been looking for. Shinyu stayed quiet, letting the investigation take its course, but the world refused to let the story rest. As the sun rose, Miles stood by her side, refusing to leave her even for a moment. The mystery remained unsolved, but one thing became certain. Something bigger was coming. Something no one expected. And fans knew this was only the beginning of a storm. The early morning air outside the apartment complex carried a heaviness that felt almost unreal. Miles stood beside Shinyu as emergency responders moved quietly around them, taking notes, speaking in low voices, trying to make sense of the strange scene inside her home. Shinyu leaned into Miles, her breathing still uneven as she tried to steady herself after the terrifying night. Her hands trembled slightly whenever she thought about the moment the door swung open and the stranger stepped inside. For a while she could not speak at all. Miles held her close, gently running his hand across her shoulder, trying to offer a sense of calm in the middle of the chaos. She looked at him with tired eyes, grateful but overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Her silence was filled with 1,000 unspoken thoughts that she did not yet know how to share. Hours passed before she finally found her voice. They sat in his car, parked quietly under a street lamp, while the world around them slowly woke up to morning. Shinyu stared at her hands before whispering that she had felt someone watching her for days. She had not been able to explain it. A strange instinct. A faint sound behind her. A shadow that seemed to linger too long. She told Miles she had tried to brush it off, but last night it became real. Miles listened with a seriousness Shinyu had rarely seen in him. He asked her gently if she had received any strange messages or calls recently. She nodded slowly, saying there had been an anonymous call the day before. The voice said nothing. Only silence on the other end. She had ended the call feeling uneasy but not knowing what to do. Now her fear made sense. Miles exhaled deeply, looking out at the faint light rising over the city. He felt a new sense of urgency settle inside him. Whatever Shinyu had been experiencing was not something they could ignore. He promised her he would not let anyone hurt her. He repeated those words until she finally looked into his eyes, believing him, trusting him. When the responders finished their initial checks, they allowed Shinyu to step back inside her apartment to gather a few important things before leaving. Miles stayed close right behind her, studying every corner, every shadow, as if ready to protect her from anything. The rooms felt even colder in the morning light. The overturned chair still lay on the floor. Her scattered belongings remained untouched. The walls seemed to hold the echo of what had happened hours before. Shinyu picked up her necklace from the bedroom and slipped it around her neck with a trembling hand. As she stood by her vanity, she noticed something she had not seen before. A small folded piece of paper tucked behind one of the drawers. It had not been there earlier. She felt her heart skip a beat as she slowly unfolded it. There were only 6 words written across the page. 6 words that made her entire body freeze. "You should have stayed quiet last time." Shinyu dropped the note and stepped back, her breath catching as fear gripped her again. Miles rushed to her side, picking up the note, carefully reading it twice, his expression shifting into controlled worry. He asked her what last time meant, but Shinyu shook her head, saying she did not know. She had never been involved in anything that should attract danger. She had never crossed anyone. She had never done anything that could justify a message like that. Miles placed a hand on her shoulder, reassuring her that they would figure this out. They would get to the truth. They would not face this alone. Shinyu nodded, but her eyes remained clouded with fear. They locked the apartment behind them and left with the promise that security would be increased immediately. Her complex agreed to station guards around the building. Extra cameras would be installed. No one would enter without being checked. Still, the weight of the night hung heavily around them. Miles took her to his home for safety. His place was quiet, calm, and far away from the chaos she had just escaped. He made her warm tea and sat beside her on the couch, letting her rest her head on his shoulder while she tried to process everything. The exhaustion soon caught up with her and she drifted into a light, restless sleep. Miles watched her for a moment, realizing how deeply the night had affected her. A protective instinct stronger than anything he had felt before rose within him. He checked his phone, opening messages from industry friends who had already heard bits of what happened. News spreads fast and the story was already leaking online. Fans everywhere were panicking, demanding updates, flooding social media with theories. Some believed a stalker was involved. Others believed someone from her past had returned. The speculation grew louder with every passing hour. When Shinyu woke up later, she found Miles sitting at the dining table looking over the security report from her building. He explained gently that the cameras had captured a figure entering the hallway around the time she heard the footsteps. The clip was blurry, impossible to identify. But one detail stood out. The person had stopped outside her door for a long moment before forcing it open. As if they wanted her to know someone was there. As if the fear itself was part of the plan. Shinyu covered her face, overwhelmed again. Miles was beside her in an instant, holding her hand, telling her she was safe, telling her nothing would happen to her while he was there. She leaned into him, taking strength from his presence. The day passed slowly, and by evening the world online had exploded with concern. Her name was everywhere. Breaking news pages posted updates. Fans sent messages filled with love and support, begging for reassurance that she was safe. A wave of emotion swept across platforms, creating one of the biggest reactions of the year. As night approached, Miles convinced her to sleep while he stayed awake in the living room, keeping watch. The apartment was silent except for the soft hum of the night air. Hours passed. Miles sat alert, his eyes fixed on the door, making sure nothing and no one approached. Before dawn, Shinyu stepped quietly into the room. She walked over and sat beside him. She said she could not sleep. The fear was still too fresh, but she also felt something else. Gratitude. She told Miles that if he had not come last night, she did not know what would have happened. Her voice shook as she thanked him. He brushed a tear from her cheek, telling her she did not need to thank him, telling her he came because she mattered to him more than she knew.